Why do you think you're so intimidating? We're at your place. We had an argument. You were clearly wrong. And for whatever you said, fine, I'm going to pack up and leave. The problem was it was about 12 o'clock at night. They get on the train and some dropkick said, mate, you must have done something wrong. Like, I've been kicked out. 2 murders. David O'Hearn and Frank Arkell.
David, a quiet living game man shop owner. He was found very dead in his lounge room. He'd been mutilated. He'd had his head removed and put in the sink. He'd had his hand cut off, the bloodied arm, used to write what was suggestive of satanic references and symbols on his walls. His intestine had been removed and put symbolically on a silver tray. Just 2 weeks later, Frank Arkell, who had been the mayor of Wollongong, I think, for well over 15 years, he was found dead, bashed severely to the head multiple times, lapel pins, tie pins put into his eyeballs. He was the youngest person to get 2 life sentences. And I look to my right, there's a woman. She's got her arms held at her back by 2 or 3 men, and there are other men yelling at her in the face.
Talking about our respective sergeants. Mine was Paul Jacob and yours was Russell Oxford. Great detectives. They taught us so much. But were they the softest people in the history of the world? Working on a job like that, the pressure, the brutality, does it change your view on humanity? The I Catch Killers podcast was a fresh start for me, as I left policing behind and started a new life. Over the years, we've laughed together, cried, and shared some powerful moments. Welcome to I Catch Killers. Welcome back to part 2 of my chat with retired Detective Chief Inspector Pamela Young, who I personally think was one of the toughest cops in New South Wales. And just by way of background, if you didn't hear part 1, we worked together for a very long time in homicide, but we also lived together for a very long time. So there's a lot of history between the two of us. So if things are said here, I'll deny it if it's embarrassing to me, but I trust you, Pam, to be kind to me.
I will try.
Okay. We're going to talk about a particularly gruesome investigation that you were involved with Russell Oxford at the time, who's one of our favourites on I Catch Killers. It was the murder of David O'Hearn and Frank Arkell. And I want to talk about that because you worked with Russell on that investigation, and it still to this day is one of the most sort of gruesome crime scenes that I've seen, and it was just a fascinating case. But before we do, and paying homage to the fact that on I Catch Killers I've never had someone on as a guest that I lived with, and people probably want to find out what it's like living in a house with 2 highly strung out homicide detectives at the same time. I'm just going to talk about one particular event that happened in our not work time, relationship time. But we're at your place, at your unit, and I think we had an argument. You were clearly wrong, and for whatever you said, and I, as I tend to do, like to make the big statement about how aggrieved I am, and decide, fine, I'm going to pack up and leave. The problem was it was about 12 o'clock at night. Grabbed all my gear, all my worldly possessions, and carried them and walked to the railway station. Then about 1 o'clock, I'm sitting at the railway station. I was living on the Central Coast at the time. I got on the train.
And we were nowhere near a railway station.
Yes. And I was carrying all my worldly possessions, and I get on the train and some dropkick said, mate, you must have done something wrong. Like, I've been kicked out. I tried to point out it was a matter of principle, that I thought I was right in the argument, therefore I was going to leave, regardless of what time. I got home to the Central Coast at probably about 3 o'clock, had an hour's sleep, and then had to turn around and come back to Sydney. But what made the day even more memorable, we were lecturing on the detectives training course. We were delivering 8-hour lectures to, I think, about 200 detectives on
one of those days
on homicide investigation. To say the fact it was a bit tense on stage is an understatement, and I think some of the reviews we got on that particular day was that the lecture was very informative, but you could feel the sexual tension. Why did we put ourselves through that? Like, who has an argument, storms out, then has to... I literally said hello to you when we walked on stage, to then have to hi and do a lecture for 8 hours.
Yeah, look, we were trying to encourage and raise perceptive detectives, weren't they? And it showed that we'd succeeded. So, we did have to hold it together a few times. Apart from anything, we just more often than not so tired from relentless on-call.
Well,
and then with two of us at the same time, you lived your on-call, meaning I got disturbed for your on-call and you get disturbed for my on-call. So effectively doing two separate lots of on-call.
I know, and that's where it added, because we're doing individually. You do on-call once every 6 weeks. So I've explained this on the podcast. You get called if there's a murder in the state.
More often than that, if you didn't have children.
Yes.
It was always, the
we'll
people couldn't, and you were asked to volunteer, and people who didn't have children.
Yes, and you
often got a lot
yourself
more
on call. So I'd
I'd
get through an on-call period and just crawl across the finishing line, and then we'd have a week's break, and then you ended up on call, and we go through the whole thing again.
Yes.
But anyway, we're just reflecting. I'm sure you were wrong.
Did you ever make it home again?
I'm sure you were wrong in that argument. I forget what it was about, but clearly it was an important issue.
But you learned a lesson, and this is important.
There's a few more storming out stories I've got. We'll talk about them later. One particular time when you're on call over Christmas, but we'll save that to another time. Okay, the murder the murders, two murders, David O'Hearn and Frank Arkell. Do you want to just talk us about, and people are interested in how you become involved in these investigations and then what happened in the investigation? So do you want to just talk us through that?
Well, the famous and good Russell Oxford is the reason I was in homicide at all. He mentored me in to homicide at Northwest Crime Squad. He taught me so much, and he seemed to like working with me. So with On Call, he was my sergeant, and he called me when that job came in. That was the second murder in what we would learn was serial murders. So Russell and I were called to the Frank Arkell murder in particular. The lovely David O'Hearn had been murdered about just 2 weeks prior to that.
And this is down in Wollongong area?
Wollongong, Albion Park area. So fascinating crimes. So this is in June of 98. The first crime of David, a quiet living gay man shop owner. He was found dead, very dead, in his lounge room. He'd been mutilated post-mortem, so after dying, extensively. He'd had his head removed and put in the sink, the kitchen sink, his own kitchen sink. He'd had his hand cut off, and the bloody end of the hand arm used to write what was suggestive of satanic references and symbols on his walls of his own home. He'd been his intestine had been removed and put symbolically on a silver tray. Other things too had happened to different parts of his body. So clearly someone very dangerous was operating. So just 2 weeks later, this is when Russell and I become involved. Frank Arkell, who had been the mayor of Wollongong, I think, for well over 15 years, or upwards of 20, and certainly always a Wollongong man, he was found dead at his home in a similar area, bashed severely to the head multiple times, and also some post-mortem mutilation, a less degree than what I've described with poor dear David. But there were lapel pins, tie pins, put into his eyeballs, for instance, and a few different things. So, Can
I just stop you there with that type of crime scene? What's the thing that's going through your mind? So you've got that crime scene, and then 2 weeks earlier there was another particularly gruesome crime scene. What's the detectives thinking at what's gone on there?
On approaching it physically, you mean, or just potential links and
just
things?
Looking at, okay, who could have committed this? What are we dealing with here? What was going through your mind and the mind of the strike force?
Yes. So we did end up, we tended to move towards that they were linked. We even had a third murder earlier that year in Sydney of a man called Trevor Parkin. Hadn't been long out of jail, and he was found in, again, appallingly mutilated condition. So potentially we had was definitely a serial killer and of the most brutal type. So, but personally, you can't dwell on that. That's too big a concept. You've got to deal on the minutiae, the tiny things. Where's the evidence? What's the evidence we're going to find here? What is important for each crime scene to be treated uniquely, and the evidence individually pursued, and then of course always be communicating about links. So it did end up our hypothesis that they were linked. Certainly was true for David O'Hearn and Frank Arkell. Trevor Parkin was a separate crime, and offender was charged separately for his murder.
Yep. And what were the links that you confidently felt that they were linked? What was the links, other than, well, not other, you take into account the brutality of the crime scenes,
yes,
but what were the other things?
The physical, the proximity, really.
Timing.
The 2 weeks apart. David was a gay man. Frank, though, had been charged with child offences. So whilst we know that gay people aren't pedophiles, it's a completely different concept and lifestyle, a lot of offenders can think that they are the same. So potentially we had an offender who thought he'd attacked two pedophiles.
Right.
So, and as it turned out, that's the case.
With the pressure that's on there, and I understand it, but explain to people the pressure when you're investigating crimes like that, 2 weeks apart, you think they're linked. When's it going to be the next person murdered? Is that,
yes,
the type of things that's going
exactly
through your mind?
Exactly. Even it's pressure from above about those things. It's they can't have deployed a team and a good team, and then while the good team's out there, then another similar crime occurs. So there's all this all pressure along that line as well, and of course we don't want it to occur either. Yeah. But you have to concentrate your areas in what you have, and we had two scenes, and we very much went over the history of Wollongong. Has some quite hideous crimes. They were also coming under notice as far as the Catholic Church and councillors and politicians from that area for child abuse matters. It was all in that era. So that was took a huge amount of our time.
That's telling me you got a lot of potential persons of interest.
Yes, it did. Was very wide. It also had a lot of gay beat areas. So, of course, we were canvassing and inquiring of anyone there if they had anyone in mind, or or any new people in the area, or any strange behaviour or conduct and things. So it was very broad and, a very broad investigation under pressure because of the nature of the crimes.
Yeah. What? When did you think you got a breakthrough, or was there one particular breakthrough? What?
There was. So under Russell's guidance, we had sensibly not released to the public, because we know how important it is to hold back material that only the killer knows about, and it's a way that you avoid false confession. So Russell had made a good decision to not release the fact that clothing, so tracksuit pants and boots not belonging to Frank Arkell, were found at the scene with Frank. So the assumption is they belong to the killer.
Okay, well, it's a
So
start.
we held on to that information because we wanted to catch the killer with the other piece of the tracksuit and potentially replaced brand new desert boots. But it got to the point of that holding off didn't work. So we did release. We got the mannequin, as you do, and extensive media coverage with exactly the same but new clothing. And we got a lot of information in.
And the appeal being, does anyone recognise this clothing? And,
yes, exactly.
Okay.
So we did get a lot of response. One in particular was a young woman who said, my boyfriend, he loves his desert boots, and I can't remember seeing him wear them for a few weeks now. So just simple things.
Yeah.
That can be overlooked in the sea of other people who say, the neighbour used to have desert boots too. I haven't seen them.
You said at the start the little things, and it is the little things.
The little things.
The details.
It is those details. So we were honing in then on her boyfriend, who was a 19-year-old called Mark Van Crevel. At the same time, with the other strike force, the one looking at the murder of David O'Hearn, they noted that Mark Van Crevel was an alibi to one of their suspects. They had many suspects, but he was an alibi to one of their suspects. So we had another possible link.
Tenuous, but
link. And then we looked at our the various crime scene logs that we kept at our scene over a number of days, and there was an entry there for an inquiry by Mark Van Crevel. So he had been to the scene of Frank's home in the days when the police were controlling the scene. So that then led to us desperately wanting his fingerprints. He was a clean skin, so no history. We did have prints at David O'Hearn's home. So it was one of the first ops that went around. We got our surveillance teams to follow him around whilst he went about his street walks, knowing nothing about him, hoping he might drink something glass or eat something from a nice, shiny, clean surface and discard it.
Yep.
And it was many days went into that, but we did get his fingerprints on a Coke bottle that he discarded into a public bin.
Yeah.
The fun jobs the police get to do, because it was
garbage.
clearly,
Yeah.
and you couldn't wait to have it, down the bottom of other people's discarded rubbish. So he had to be seen putting it in, because it was going to be evidence.
Yeah.
He had to be seen putting it in, photographic seen, visually seen. He had to be far enough away for the surveillance, the dogs, to dive in and grab it before other people in the busy Wollongong streets filled it up with other things, because then you can't distinguish his from theirs. They did really well, and we ended up with his print matching
to
the O'Hearn scene
case. Yep.
Plus then, it's nothing or everything at the same time.
Yeah.
In the alibi statement that he'd given for the David O'Hearn matter, alibying one of their suspects, we got his statement out, original statement, not the one now on a
electronic.
Yes, electronic one, and fingerprinted it. So it was his statement with his name on it, with his prints on it, that matched the Coke bottle, the statement page, and the wall. So we had him for O'Hearn's, and we were ready to the arrest.
Because there's pressure on there, because you're at that stage where you could
more pressure, in fact,
make a
than
move.
prior.
Ideally, you wouldn't have to, but you can't let him run and let someone be killed.
You can't let him run, and at the same time, he could be innocent. So pressure was right, and we were ready to go. We knew we were at a stage after. I can't remember how long that job went. It might have been a year. I can't remember, but it wasn't a short-term job. And building up to it, and then I'm staying down there, and I get the call from Wollongong to say, a Taekwondo instructor has brought in his student. Student's name's Mark Van Crevel.
Yeah.
He wants to confess to the murders, and it was a gift.
Yeah.
So it's just all hands on deck that night. He made a full confession. And then Russell and Joe Casa did an excellent walkthrough interview with him. Some people have criticised that interview for saying that, Russell's too prescriptive. But I see even now I want to say that's because Russell well knew, because he'd done the earlier interview, that the confession that Van Crevel had given was full and frank, and Russell was just making sure that no detail was missed at the scene. It was just a cover off. So apart from the hideous crimes and the fact he just went out with poor David O'Hearn. He just went out wanting to know what it felt like to kill somebody. Yeah, that's more or less a quote. With O'Hearn, he suggested he was a bad man. But that was really played out more once he was in defence mode and was learning about O'Hearn charges and things. Yeah. So he tried that. So the striking thing, and this endless curiosity that the job allows us to learn these things, is he had no hesitation, not even a change of voice or a look on his face when he's describing in detail what he did to those men and their bodies. Yeah. Not hesitation. This is a 19-year-old. But if in the interview, if he swore, he went into profuse apologies because he knew that was rude. That wasn't the type of manners he was brought up to express himself by.
That is a fascinating side of the job, isn't it?
Fascinating. Yeah. So it was okay to murder, mutilate and describe, but not to use a swear word. Yeah. It is fascinating. Yeah. So he was the youngest person to get two life sentences, but under which was brand new at the time and never to be released scheme. Yeah. So he's still in, of course.
I think I bumped into him in prison.
I was going to say not out. Down at the shops.
He's been released. Yeah. Those bail laws, we've got to
nice. He was a great sweeper. He did great sweeping. They let him out.
If it is, I think it was him who just put on a lot of weight and live in
it. But, look, he had a shocking upbringing, as so many sadly do, but nonetheless.
There's sad upbringings and that. But there's even a further twist to this story. Do you want to take us there?
Yes. So... again, I can't remember the time frame. It wasn't too long after. So Mark Van Crevel is in the court system well and truly when his sister is picked up for soliciting her boyfriend Shriver to murder her father, so also Mark Van Crevel's father, with an axe, and he did so successfully. So you've got the brother, the sister, and their friend up for really shocking offences. Yeah,
pretty chilling offences. Even in all that we've seen, that sort of sticks in your mind. Working on a job like that, the pressure, the brutality, the just the horribleness of it. Does it change your view on humanity? Do you look at people a little bit differently? Does it affect you at all?
So the answer is yes. I can only say yes so firmly because I've learnt that it did affect me. And not necessarily that job. There's a category of jobs, I believe all jobs affect us. It is unnatural for any human to look on the violent death of another human being. Yeah. It's unnatural. But someone has to do it. Yeah. It can't be done by anyone else. It has to be done by investigators, and doctors and forensic pathologists, and then there's the photos everyone needs to look at it. So it has to be done, but it is unnatural, and it must affect everyone, and does affect everyone. It's whether you acknowledge it and to what extent. So my answer is yes, it affected me, but not in relation to what I think about humanity. I think the thing that has allowed me to cope is that being so close to death, seeing how death is brought about violently, seeing, whilst it's a devastating impact, but it's limited in the population. And if it wasn't for media and other interested groups using fear as a means to get ratings, I think the community as a whole would feel more relaxed about the community, because I have been up close in the face, standing in the middle of the very worst of humanity, and I still believe in it.
Yeah.
I still know the vast majority of people are good people. But I have come away with triggers that are spontaneous reactions to various visual signs and colours, such as colour of blood, for instance. Triggers around violence towards women. I do think that I'm particularly still, and I think I always will, be triggered by violence towards women. Do we have time? I'll tell you the most bizarre.
Yeah, we've got time.
I mean, I still think it's bizarre.
Hey, I run this podcast. We can go.
So the most, and part of it, it upsets me, but I think it was such a clear demonstration to me that what emergency services face. It's not me. I'm not weaker or stronger than anybody else. But it played out this way. It was so I went to Spain. I was in Barcelona and walking down that. Is it the Ramblas? That it's the riverbank area that they've converted into a centre wide pedestrian mall, effectively, leading from the city park down to the water. It's
Barcelona.
beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Yes, and on either side there's two-laned roads, busy roads, and shops, densely packed shops on either side across the road. So I'm walking in the middle on a holiday, and I hear yelling, and I look to my right and I see there's a woman, a black woman, being held. She's got her arms held back, held at her back by 2 or 3 men, and there are other men yelling at her in the face, and she's yelling back. She's giving as good as she's getting verbally, though she's being restrained. I just summed it up. I thought possibly she's a shoplifter and she's being yelled at by the person who owns the shop. She was the only woman in that area. Everyone else was men. And I just thought, I thought, I just took it in. I clocked it, our term is. So then I just looked again, and I saw a man come from behind the two interested groups, walk in front to her and punched her with all his might, straight in her face. I saw that. Now, the very next thing I know is I come to over on the footpath. So I've left this wide mall area, got across 2 lanes of traffic. I'm standing on the footpath with her at my back, staring at the man who's punched her to stop what he's... I don't know what he's doing to stop if he was going to hit her again. I have no idea
what the situation
how I
was.
got from in the middle of the mall
Yeah.
to in the middle of them. So I come to, and then logic comes in and think, well, they're all speaking Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I'm not in the police force over here. I'm in the New South Wales Police. What am I doing here? What can I do? So I'm just going like this and making sweet smiling faces. And the men that weren't him, they settle it. They see themselves, that's gone too far. And I was with some friends, and I thought, my goodness, I'm going to have to explain what just happened. So I'm walking back, fully conscious, crossing the road carefully. It was a very busy road. Getting in the middle again. I'm thinking, excuse, what can my excuse be for explaining that bizarre behaviour? And I get back, and the first thing they say is, oh, you're so brave. You went to help that woman.
Yeah.
And I left it there. I was going to say, look, it
don't
was
even know what I
something.
did.
It was literally, it was a trigger, a PTSD related trigger around the safety of women.
Yeah, yeah.
A woman, a stranger woman in a foreign country, a stranger woman in a foreign country who's committed a crime. So it doesn't matter. It's that trigger.
Thanks for sharing it, because I have spoken to other police officers that if they talk about how it's affected them, and there's strange situations like that where they're standing in the middle of the road, don't know what they're doing, just different things like that. That's part of the policing, but it's in your instinct too. I know you well enough to know you can't stand by whether it was a perceived injustice, but probably a bit stupid in that environment. You didn't know what you were walking into.
Yes, but the thing, so you say stupid, and I know, Jubelin, you don't think PTSD really exists. I know that about you, because I just know, because we've talked about it.
Doesn't
even for
exist
you
in
to
me.
say, even
Shut up,
you
Young.
keep believing that.
Kill switch. Go.
So you, even in that sentence, you said probably a bit silly because you couldn't really help that woman.
Yeah.
You've missed the whole thing is I was not conscious of what I was doing. A trigger.
Yeah.
You're a gunman. You've pulled a few. that trigger in me was I must protect that woman.
I must have been born with PTSD then.
That's not beyond the realms. You're still getting over your dad.
Yeah, well,
it is. If you think trauma is a normal state because you had it since childhood, so the addition of police trauma is just a normal life for you.
Anyway, we'll move on from that. So chaos is the norm. Anyway, what's the next topic? Does it change your view on humanity?
The encyclopedia.
Move past. Let's go to a happy topic.
Yes.
Our role models. And I hope it steers towards Russell Oxford and Paul Jacob, because we had a lot of fun when we were senior constables talking about our respective sergeants. Mine was Paul Jacob, and yours was Russell Oxford. Great detectives, and they taught us so much. But were they the softest people in the history of the world?
Yeah, we used to say to each other, like I'd say, my sergeant's nicer than yours, and you say, no, my sergeant's nicer than yours, and this little affectionate bantering.
What I like about both of them, that I think they were rock solid, strong human beings, but they kept a humanity to them the whole way through, and it taught me, probably taught you a lot too, because I was somewhat angry, as you might, and intense, and the same.
Really?
It come as a surprise.
I'll reflect and see if I can remember.
But they, the things I learned off Jaco, how he's so inclusive in running a strike force.
Yes.
Everyone was involved, from the most junior person to the senior person. Everyone felt like they were contributing. Attention to detail. I couldn't understand why we're sitting there, at 11 o'clock at night. I wanted to go home. I'm tired and all that, but just attention to detail, thoroughness.
Yes.
And we were fortunate to have two role models like that, because I know you think highly of
very
Russell.
sustaining.
Yeah.
Sustaining. With your Jaco.
Yeah.
Your Jaco.
My Jaco.
That he would expressly use the word love when he spoke to people, when he was appreciating their efforts and their good work, and he would say, and I love you, to cops of all genders. So repeatedly it was natural. It wasn't,
it was genuine.
It was genuine. That the easily accepted philosophy now, there's so many types of love. With Russell, just a little demo comes to mind, for instance, how nice he was, because he was always so good with keeping standards and explaining the need for preservation and why things were done in a certain way. But if he found an officer at a crime scene with their boot ever so slightly over the top of any sort of blood trace, he was the type of nice person. He'd go up and say, look, it's Bill, isn't it? Bill, see how your foot is there on the blood. I think you should take your boot off, and you're going to be we're going to carry you out so that there's no other disturbance. Would you mind? It should just take a couple of minutes to get around, but we'll do that. That's what Russell would do, whereas I would have spotted him at the door, Bill, and I said, I would have said, fucking Bill, take your boot off and you're going to walk home back to the station in your socks. Look at what you've done.
Yeah.
That's
doing the same thing but a different way.
They showed how you could be professional and respected and be kind and be good.
Yeah, I know, because we've spoken about it so often. I just feel lucky that we got to work under people like that could mentor us, that carry those.
I want to mention two other role models. Kim Mackay, she and Maria Ruscher, they made it to superintendent long before my sights was set on those positions, and they both headed up the arduous, tough child protection units at separate times. And Kim, she was the commander for those shocking Strike Force Seda, multiple serial Lebanese Australian-related sexual assaults across Sydney of women and girls.
Yep.
Bilal Scaff is still serving time in jail. He was a pack leader. She did a great job holding the office together and assisted those, resolving those shocking crimes. Plus, so her strength was about how to look after staff. Yeah. So I got from Russell about how to look after crime scenes, and from Kim about staff. With Maria, she fought tooth and nail to have child protection matters acknowledged properly. They are volume crime.
They were, when Maria was running it, it was just a horrible time for them because they were so overworked and no one gave them respect.
No one gave, and we're talking people inside, like their bosses, including just with the volume crime. Remember, any crime had to be reported on a SITREP, a situation report. Maria was faced with a situation where, with child abuse, there was so many SITREPs, they were following the policy and submitting them to our directors, our executive, and Maria's boss effectively told her, don't send them through anymore. There's too many for us to read. Not, there's so many, we will get you more staff, or we will, let's see if we can help. It was, don't send them. So it was less acknowledged, because they weren't reading what was happening. So it was a very disturbing time, and Maria was successfully fought against that. So I still would say street cops and child protection workers have the toughest gigs.
Yeah, and the two that you mentioned, I worked with Kim. I wasn't in homicide; she was in homicide. I remember she came out to one of the first homicides I worked on, and very impressed by how her and the team were working. And Maria, I think I tried to get, it might have been through you, tried to get Maria on the podcast years ago. But both. I'm glad you've given them a shout out because again, they got through as females in a tough male environment. And,
Kim was the first boss to extend emotional support to me, first and only boss. Yeah. And that's when I'm a very senior sergeant by then. Yeah. And she was in
that's
tune
when you're
with
in sex crimes.
Yeah, she offered a sabbatical. She saw it was never. I've had some very good bosses, but not once offered emotional support. Yeah. So there you go.
Oh well, no, they deserve a mention.
Yeah.
All right. I wanted to talk about, and we don't have to talk about it long, but I think it's worth talking about it, that we're both in major crime when the Royal Commission came through. And, I was in North Region, you were in North West. Both regions were hit pretty hard with the Royal Commission. I often get asked about those times, and you can't shy away from it. There was corruption in the police, and it was in the work environments that we worked. I'm talking about the after effects of it. That I really felt that as detectives, I felt shame for what had been exposed. I choose my words here carefully because there were some people that needed to be they were bad, and they were using the job to do whatever they were doing. And it certainly wasn't police work. But I say this, there was some weak people that were caught up in it because they didn't know how to say no. You and I navigated our way through that, but we could stand up for ourselves. I saw some people get caught up because of just the influence of the group, and they were caught up. What's your take on those times?
Well, I would start with saying the command, had so many more people who were not corrupt than the smaller number that was. So, speaking of Crime Squad Northwest, if I remember correctly, we had about 100, let's say 120 with child protection, of which 3, 5, 7, let's even double it, 15, let's say, in the drug squad in particular, and I think only in the drug squad, and I think the number is closer to 5, by the way, were targeted rightly and were caught out rightly. So even then, in the dark days before the Royal Commission, we really were good. We were good. If anything, I've seen more negligence or laziness. Corruption, to me, is a smaller concern. Even wherever it is, it's bad and it needs to be rooted out. But my goodness, there are more crimes left unsolved, or where convictions, even good briefs of evidence that at the end of the day don't hold, through negligence and laziness, disorganisation.
At last, Young, I've found someone that I've been trying to articulate that very thing. Yeah, I was in major crime when the Royal Commission came through and they identified corruption. Do I think that corruption was worse than some of the stuff I see now by not properly resourcing or properly investigating things? No, I don't. Yeah, that was bad, but it's just as bad to not properly resource an investigation or lie to the public, or even worse, lie to victims about what's been done on an investigation. Yeah, we joke, and we're not into bashing the police. We both love the police, but so I'm choosing my words here carefully. But telling people there's a strike force running on this when the strike force was basically one person, and little things like that. So I do understand what you're saying.
Yes, but sometimes that's the fact, and that's only possible because of the disparity between the number of, let's say, cold cases, just to grab a sample area, cold case homicides, and the number of staff. So it's not, there are other staff that could be used, but we're only going to give it one staff. It's just there's no movement, there's no fat, there's no reserve bench. So it's a huge question, but what is the proper resourcing, as in staff positions, to properly work through crimes, all crimes and unsolved crimes.
And we've both been in management, so we understand that the resources are limited and they've got to be put where that they can be best utilised. But I do see, it's all right saying that was a corrupt days. Glad we've cleared up the corruption, but don't think just because it's all polished up and looking shiny and the media are reporting all nice things about the police, everything is being done properly.
Yeah, I do think that it's 95, wasn't it, that Wood Royal Commission? So that was on the back of that heroin trade worldwide. That addiction. No one sees anything like that now. No one sees the damage to individuals and the community through. We saw it. And we attempted to lock up a few people with it. But that then seeped into, for instance, drug squads. So,
It's also a reflection on society, too. It wasn't just the police. There was people outside of the police, whether it be politicians or others, caught up in the whole
and
thing.
Greedy, the people we know, at Northwest who were charged or certainly named, and really greedy, small-minded, unethical, lazy, lacking self-esteem.
And thought they were tough guys.
And
thought they were tough guys.
Exactly.
But
that's the type.
I know. But anyway, the point I want to make with that whole Royal Commission, I felt aggrieved as detectives because our reputation was just sullied within our own organisation, within the public and all that. And people like yourself, myself, that have been through it, we had to fight to get that reputation back.
Yes. And the thing, and it comes in with a few other things at play, but that was the first demonstration to me of how the police force as a whole, but meaning really the individuals in it, are offered up as sacrifices to social ills or political aims. The cops, and we've seen it time and time again and very recently, seen as the whipping post, the whipping boy of lack of proper policy or budget or so that was the first example to me of media and politicians and interest groups being allowed to go for I call us the low-hanging fruit.
The cops.
The cops. And it's convenient for others above us who really could control and assist and support more, because it's a lovely distraction to their neglect or lack of budget or something, or lack of properly resourcing the police force. So, I'd like the public to be a little bit more aware of that.
Okay. That brings us to a nice segue. Because I was going to, I wanted to, at the start of this episode, I talked about, the toughest cop in New South Wales, because people had asked me, who's the toughest cop in New South Wales? And they'd think I'd be saying, someone, and I go, Pam Young. Oh, right. Where's that come from? You have you don't shy away from what needs to be said. Now, I've collected a couple of examples here, and I'll talk you through it, and you can explain your position. Okay, so Pam was an association rep, the New South Wales Police Association, the rep. The association reps go on what they call the annual conference, and it's usually at this swish, beautiful, 5-star resort for 3 or 4 days of just palling around and discussing the important stuff, looking after the people they're here to support. Pam goes to this, and I think it was on the Central Coast. Was it at the Crown? Not the Crown.
All those 5-star hotels. Once you're inside, it's hard to tell.
So these are our association reps that are looking after.
I think it was Wollongong.
Looking after the working men, and so they have the meeting
and women
and women, of course. Yeah, correct me. They have the. Has anyone got any motions to put forward? And I think Pam put a hand up and said yes. Do we really have to waste our members' money staying in these luxury resorts? Couldn't we have this conference at police headquarters? Why are we wasting their money? Surprisingly, no one seconded your motion,
all.
And there was just silence.
Yes.
I think you were right in what you said, but it doesn't make you popular.
No, or successful. No popularity, no success. Oh, and I just do a plug for the association, though. They do some excellent work supporting members, including myself, as things went.
Oh, right. So now you've sold out. Now you want them back in the luxury resorts. But no, I thought that was a reasonable point. At least it warranted discussion. The fact that no one seconded your motion was a bit sad.
Yes, not one.
Anyway, another great Pam Young moment. It was in the homicide office. New South Wales Police had become bankrupt, apparently, or so we were told.
Yes.
So we had to work on murder investigations, but they couldn't pay us overtime. We couldn't travel.
Yes.
I was doing an investigation around the state, but I couldn't travel. It was ridiculous. They
were going to remove the water, weren't they? We weren't allowed to have the water.
Yeah, it was just we had run out of money, apparently. Yes. And so there was a lot of agitating, especially from us at Homicide, because it was really impacting on important investigations. And we got the police minister there, and I forget who it was at the time, but it was a fairly intense meeting. Like a lot of people in Homicide are not backwards in coming forward and say what needs to be said. But there was one comment that stood out from everyone else when Pam's speaking to the minister saying, well, perhaps here at Homicide we should just strive for mediocrity. Is that what you want us to do? Strive for mediocrity.
I think he agreed.
On the back of that, we did get some injection of money.
Yes, we did. I misquoted. He didn't agree we should strive for mediocrity, and yes, he did deliver. But he said, he pointed at me and he said, "You're a cynic," which I thought was the opposite of what I was, but anyway. And then he did, the budget was increased.
Yes, we got it significantly increased, and we were actually allowed to go back to work and do some work. So, just another one, and we're going to talk about this in the next part 3 of we're going into 4 parts too. I'm breaking that to you now. Now, the only other people that have gone into 4 parts on I Catch Killers is Graham Abbo Henry.
Oh,
so you followed notorious standover gangster man. He's been a guest favourite here, and also Russell Oxford. So you're in good company. Nick Caldos only made 3 episodes. That's because
don't let him know that. No,
he'll come back and demand another 2. That's because he's so busy. Okay, you were put in a position of heading up, and you were in fact the first female to have this position, heading up the detectives training unit, and very important role. And we're going to talk more in detail. I just want to talk about one aspect of the detectives training unit. I remember at the time you were getting into a lot of trouble and there was a lot of pressure because you decided that although the politicians had promised and the senior police had promised more detectives, you weren't going to pass the majority of them because they weren't up to a standard that you considered acceptable. Oh. How did that go, Pam?
I couldn't believe, to me it was quite bizarre, these discussions and debates on changing the standard, like lowering the pass mark to like below 50.
Yeah.
So for recruiting purposes, and I recruit. Clearly, there's a balance has to be struck, but it was to me like a no-brainer that if they didn't pass the exams, then they probably should.
Because in your position, you had to sign off on these people are ready to go out and work with other detectives.
Yes, be designated.
Yeah, so your signature's on the...
To lead. Yeah. And to lead others and to take charge of entire crime scenes, of which many of them are major crime scenes. So it was a long debate, and I kept pushing back, and the push was from people more senior to me, entrenched in the world of the academy and believing it was possible. I did get a lot of assistance from State Crime Command, who agreed that people probably should pass their exams.
It seems like a fairly obvious concept.
You
have exams so you can pass them.
And State Crime had a role as the lead detective advisor, and I had an inaugural position on the first advisory panel to the Deputy Commissioner, and so that's the argument that the people who failed should be passed was lost. It was just the bizarre nature of having to argue it in the first place. Yeah.
I know how much it pissed you off, and it pissed me off, and a lot of other people. That it should be something that we set standards, and we should strive for those standards and be proud of. Because I remember when I got my detective's designation, because we had to work so hard, I was so proud. It was one of the proudest moments in the cops to walk out and you can finally call yourself a detective.
And you're getting them to standard, not just of taking lead on jobs and communicating with their bosses so that the information's correct, arguing for resources. It's beyond that. Is they're going to be in court facing the top lawyers, criminal lawyers, some of them unprincipled, who are going to cross-examine them, tackle them, make them look like idiots.
Yeah.
Our role, my role, was to put them in the best position to get the conviction and to not look like an idiot. So passing exams is kind of part of that. Yeah,
well, look where that got you, Young. Just trying to take it all too serious. Okay, we're going to finish off part 2 with a fun fact. It's a bit embarrassing, but I'm
ready.
I'm not sure if I am.
I can kick you under this. I can kick you under this table, can't I?
What was I thinking when I wrote this down? But anyway, now, when we first got together, I expressed an interest in you, and you knocked me back. And but you said you admired my courage for being game enough to ask you out, because most men are scared of you. And let me tell you, that is true, because everyone in the office feared you. And when eventually you came to your senses and you decided to go out with me, everyone kept saying, geez, you must be brave, as in I must be brave. question I'm going to ask, and the question I want
Brave,
to
but you were very happy.
brave and very content and very happy. Can I just ask you this, and this is how we'll finish off part 2. Why do you think you're so intimidating?
This is one I haven't put my mind to. Might come in 2 parts, a bit today and a bit another time. I think, you know what? I think because I'm genuine. I think because I speak my mind, and that people know what they're dealing with, that I'm not inclined to be susceptible to peer group pressure.
Yeah.
That some loyalty in the police requires a person to be susceptible to peer group pressure and to be agreeable or supportive against their own principles. I think it just... Our job is very much played out. We're always communicating, so much about communication. And so I just think people hear me speak. I occasionally might say something correct or clever or certainly clear. And and other people might not have the clarity on it. Does that? I don't know.
I reckon that you just...
I'm a bit tall and I wear boots. That's the
I reckon
other
you've
bit.
just given people a good understanding of why I was nervous asking you out. I discussed it with my mate Jason, and he's a good Jason Evers.
He's a lovely man. He gave you your whole personality.
Well, so he says. I reckon I had the personality before.
I agree. I saw
you
it.
agree. But I said, I think I'm going to ask Pam out. He's going, don't get that wrong. It could be ugly. Could be ugly. But anyway, that's a nice way to finish part 2. When we get back, we're going to... for part 3, we've got a lot more to talk about, and one of the cases that I want to talk about, because I reckon it's one of the most significant cases in the country, the family law court bombings, and you led that investigation successfully after a very long time, and I want to dive deep into that investigation because I think it's fascinating, but the magnitude of that crime, I think we've missed the point of how significant that was, where judges' places have been.
Well, it has been described, and the Prime Minister at the time came out and formed the largest strike force that had ever been of combined federal military and New South Wales police. Really significant. It has been described as the most significant case of domestic terrorism ever in the country. Yeah. And it was a very cold case when I got it. And you might hear that we breathed some life into it.
We might hear that. So that'll be on part 3 when you come back with my chat with retired Detective Chief Inspector Pamela Young.
And why do you think I'm intimidating?
And when we get back for get back to part 3, I'll answer that question why I think you're intimidating. Because Jesus, if you fuck up, you're in trouble.